morning, everybody. Good morning, Luis. How are you doing?
What's going on, John? Awesome to see you again. Always a pleasure. What's going on with you?
It's a special Friday episode. So I'm just hanging out, man. It's a beautiful day out here. We got the windows open. It's feeling like summer's coming right around. I'm just excited. I'm ready for the gloom to
I
go.
love it. I've got my coffee ready. I'm ready to go.
I like the Best Dad Cup. I'm a big Best Dad Cup too. I don't have it today, but my Dadosaurus mug is one of the go-tos. So
I love it.
I'm excited. Now you just got back off the road, right? You just landed in home yesterday.
That's right. Yeah, a couple events. We were in Dallas for Robin Robbins a week ago, and then this last week it was Empower Enables event in Fort Lauderdale. Couple back-to-back things, and yeah, running around like we usually do in the channel, always trying to hit up all the different events. You see all the same people. It dawned on me actually that channel folks just never say goodbye. You just kind of disappear into the night or into the morning cab ride back to the airport, and then you just kind of see each other at the next event. It's kind of like starting all over again. But it's this funny thing. Like I don't remember any single time of like actually stopping to go say bye to somebody after leaving an event. Everybody just Irish exits out of the thing. You just see them at the next thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's like nobody even wants to interface that morning going the cab ride home early. We're like we're socialed out. We're all ready to just get in the ride and get back to where we're going.
So true.
Matt, good to see you. And it is the Luis Giraldo. I am so excited to have him on the show today. I mean, you are a fantastic podcast host on your own show. You're a phenomenal contributor to our community. You've added so much, and you and I got to meet each other about 5 or 6 years ago and working together on the GTIA or previously CompTIA councils.
That's right.
It's been wonderful to work and collaborate with you. So I'm excited to talk about this topic today. Just for everybody that's out there, Matt, thanks for saying hi. If you were there, say hi. It makes it way more fun for us. Ask questions along the way. And quick questions like if you're in the audience today and you're tuning in because you want to really talk about this people side of AI, are you hitting any internal friction at your business or at your customers around the people side of AI? In my opinion, this thing's a lot more org change than it is tech change. And this is going to be one of the best topics on coffee chats in a while. So if you're hitting internal friction, share it, ask some questions. We've got an expert on the show here. So that's all the housekeeping for the show. It's really light and simple. Lisa, I would love for people who maybe don't know you, it might be few and far in between, but the people who don't, I like your story, not the elevator pitch, like the story of you. So give us the 3-minute version, the 5-minute version. Like, let's get to know who you are before we kick the show off.
Oh gosh, man. Yeah, actually, it's funny that I think this is maybe the ongoing frustration of being in this industry as somebody who is constantly talking to others about educating, about inculcating, about trying to move the industry forward. Matt Lee, good to see you, buddy. Thanks for saying hi. Matt's a great example of this, somebody who's always trying to raise the bar, improve the baseline of security for folks far and wide. But it feels like we get into this very repetitive message. And I think this becomes frustrating. And I had a great conversation with Peter Kujawa about this not long ago, too. It's like, I asked him, hey, doesn't it get a little frustrating for you that we seem to be talking about the same things? In fact, Dan Wensley, a CEO of GTIA, just this week in Fort Lauderdale said we were commiserating about the same idea. 15 years ago, we were saying the exact same thing. And 15 years from now, we'll probably be saying the exact same thing. But Peter actually had this interesting insight about it, which is, this is actually what makes it so interesting because you see the folks coming into the industry and you see the light in their eyes, the opportunity for new blood, to call it something, to come in, to get exposure, to get learning, to get education. And I think it is kind of our job to forget about the repetition, but take advantage of the opportunity of just constantly getting a chance to educate. And then I think what happens is, generationally speaking, those things start to latch on to the generations, and it happens a little faster over time. But in our one generation, we may not see that change happen as obviously as you might see it across different generations. And so this was a really good point of patience or of impact that I think we have to be aware that sometimes we might be planting seeds for trees that we may never sit under, if you will. And so that's kind of how I view the duty or the role of a guy like Matt Lee, who is doing work now that he may not get to see the benefit of potentially. So I don't know. That's something that I think has driven me in my history. And to answer your question about the history, I was a musician my whole life. I have music and tech and computers, and so that kind of got me into technology a little bit. And then I started doing residential IT back in like early 2000s. And that led to a couple of business customers, which then led to actually somebody handing me a managed services agreement, basically, and having to reverse engineer that and building a business kind of from that. Had a couple of transactions with MSPs over the years, built a software platform, which then got acquired by IT Glue. Chris Day was there at the time, and then that kind of put one of my feet over in the SaaS vendor side, and that's kind of how I was operating for the last few years. One foot in the MSP business, one foot in the SaaS business, and about almost 4 years ago now, I exited the MSP, hopefully now for the last time, and sinking my teeth fully into ScalePad and the vendor side, and doing the work that we're doing now.
Yeah, I love it. I'm with you here, Matt. Like, this is what a little bit of the show's about, right, Matt? Luis, you said you got the next generation of people come in the industry. I can't fool myself. I'm a little bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I'm excited about the change we've got going on. I said over at IT Nation last year, I said, I'm excited, though, to for once be a leader on one of these big epochs. I was a contributor to some of the other ones. But I look at this shift happening, and it's exciting. And it's why I'm appreciative of you taking the time to get on the show, people like Matt, constantly educating, and taking that mantra of let's plant those trees that we never intend to sit under so that the people behind us can have a little bit of shade. So I love the story. I love all the things you've continued to do to the ecosystem. And again, if you're out there, I know Luis isn't shy. We're going to answer some questions and jump right in. And today's show, we're going to talk about people. We're not talking about technology at all. I like that. A little correction there. But we're going to talk about people, not technology, and the real AI barrier. We're going to talk about strategies for bringing the team along. And we're going to talk about building a people-first culture that actually sticks around AI. And so this topic's super unique and special to me. I drove a lot of org change management in my last company when I was at Auvik. I learned a lot in the grinder, and I'm curious to learn from you today, Luis. So that's about the longest I'm going to talk. This isn't my show. Well, it's my show, but you're the guest, and I want to hear from you. So let's jump into it. Like, why people and not technology are the real barrier. I'd love to get just a gut reaction to that statement alone. Like, why are people the real barrier on this AI innovation cycle we're getting into? What do you think?
Yeah, the thing that got me started thinking about this was that graphic, that study I shared with you. 84% of however many billion people we have in the world have never touched AI. And it just got me thinking of like, well, we kind of are definitely in our own little bubble of technology. We love it. I think we enjoy it. I think we have a very different view of technology in general than I would say the average, frontline worker.
Mhm.
And it just dawned on me that along with that passion for technology, along with those, I guess, exploration capabilities that we have, always trying to find the newest thing and always excited about it, we forget that sometimes people maybe don't have this much passion or excitement about the work that they do. The work might be important and necessary and critical and all those things. I think we can't take that away from any kind of person's job.
Mhm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean they enjoy it or that they want it to change.
Yeah.
Then there's human nature. I think people are protecting their little ecosystems, as it were. And so when anything comes along that could disrupt that, could disrupt their little fiefdoms, kingdoms, whatever you call it, of influence, the spheres of control that they have, I think people reject this very easily. And so there's a lot of folks that probably don't understand AI, probably don't understand why this matters. And there's a quick rush to say that the ROI of AI is efficiency, and that's what we're seeing right now, of course. So no wonder people are scared. You're seeing all these layoffs at big software companies. This is absorbing all the headlines and the news cycles. What are people to do when their company suddenly says, "Oh, we have this big AI initiative this year"? They do it at their quarterly or annual kickoff or what have you. I mean, if I had no influence on the decisions that a company is making, I might be concerned too. And so I think when you extrapolate all those concerns about fear, about skepticism, about habits and ways of working that are going to change, you're going to encounter some resistance. And I think for us in our position as technology folks to ignore that is maybe puts us in a precarious situation of just trying to push a string up the hill type of thing.
Yeah, and I pulled up that graphic you had talked about or referenced. This graphic kind of shocked me personally when you shared it with me initially. We live in our ecosystem, and we go to our conferences, and we know everybody's using AI, right? Like, surely there's nobody in the world that hasn't used AI. You're not running agents, you're not running Claude Code. This graphic for me really solidifies a lot of importance, because when you actually zoom into this data chart, like the amount of people that are actually going beyond just trying a free tool and into I've spent money because I see value, and then I'm spending a lot of money maybe in the coding scaffold to get the higher, even deeper value. This is February 2026. Like, this is 2 months ago. And I think one thing that this chart really said to me, and it's just a reminder to me, is that while we might be at a conference listening to tracks, and we might be at the shows talking to everybody who's on the bleeding edge, we have to remember when we're talking to our clients that they're still dragging a little bit behind. I'll give a little tip here that I picked along the way when I ran our org change at Aavik. And you said this fear and this skepticism. I remember sitting down, quite frankly, with our CHRO and our CEO and saying, we have to hit this in front, and we have to communicate our plan on how we're doing AI. Not we're doing AI, but like, what is the intent? What is the outcome? Is it
Totally,
is it more jobs? Is it more automation? Is it more growth? Is it, skill ups? Like, if we don't communicate to people, I've always learned that in the lack of information, people tend to jump to the worst. And so, yeah, I'd love you to react to that.
Totally. I think you nailed it right there. People jump to their own conclusions if you're not clearly communicating. And I think people are smarter than they're often given credit for. And I think any positioning that the leadership tries to make on some of these types of initiatives where it's not super truthful, or maybe it's kind of just high level but not really getting into the details enough, or it's not really counting on the participation of people when big organization-wide change is at bay. I think it creates some awesome, interesting and rifts inside the business. Stephen Friedkin, who came on the podcast from Intiva, he tells this story. He's actually communicated this far and wide at this point, but they had this interesting project inside their organization where they're going to launch an AI initiative, a chatbot, a type of thing. And then they went and launched it, and it just kind of didn't get the traction that it needed. And then they kind of decided to take it offline and revisit the whole thing. So now, committees, questions, question periods, all these types of things kind of came about to make sure that they got the feedback from folks. Everybody gave their feedback, and the long and short of it is they relaunched the project, and now it was successful. But the interesting part is that nothing changed about the way they launched the project from the first time to the second time, except for the fact that people had input and commentary and the ability to give their opinions along the way. And so it speaks a lot to the accountability that people will have to an initiative, to how they feel about the things that are being rolled out, whether they're a part of them or not, as opposed to a very top-down heavy approach to types of initiatives where somebody just gets told to do and gets told to do, and constantly being just told to do this, do that. I think it wears thin over time, especially with generations that feel like their impact matters a lot more than perhaps our generation. As a Gen Xer, I've had corporate jobs where I was just happy to do what I was being told to do.
Yeah.
And there's a meme going around, an Instagram reel where it's a 14-year-old complaining to their parents, "Don't tell me what to do." Da, da, da. And then there's a 24-year-old in the workforce. "Could you please tell me exactly what to do?"
Yeah.
And I thought the irony was hilarious. But anyways, so we have those challenges around agency, around accountability, around individuality. I think all those things are difficult to ignore.
Yeah, I've seen a very clear, you can't plot it directly, but a very clear chart on adoption of AI when it comes to generations. Like there is definitely a bit of a scout, like a bit of a way to plot it out. It would be very interesting to see some of the deeper data around it. But um, you know, go ahead.
I just want to say about this because I had a wonderful chat this week in Fort Lauderdale with Rex from PAX 8. Who else was there? Dan Candy from Cork. Um, and we were talking about this generational thing because we were well represented at the table.
Yeah.
And I think we all make the mistake of using this very broad brush to paint the generational profile
Mhm.
with. And I think there is so much more nuance than that. And we were talking specifically about risk, appetite, risk mitigation, and stuff like this in the context of whether it's insurance or appetite for innovation and change and stuff like that. And I think every generation, no matter which one it is, if it's the Zennials, the Millennials, you name it, Gen Xers, there's going to be people on all parts of that spectrum of
Mhm.
risk appetite, of risk profile. And I think it's unfair to any one generation to say, oh, these folks, want this or are like this or have that, or and so on. So that was just my disclaimer that I,
No,
I don't I don't see that as a single swath of types overall.
yeah, and it's an absolute call out, right? That it's a lot of gray. There is no black and white. I've yet to find a black and white
Yeah.
pattern in this entire journey. Um, I never send out the show notes to folks, so I know you don't have the show notes. But the next question, I love that you used these words earlier. You said fear and skepticism. Word for word, the question that was coming up next is how do fear, skepticism, and entrenched habits show up when the AI is introduced to a team? And I think you covered that one, but I wanted to give you some marks for actually nailing the next segue perfectly.
Oh,
So I wanted to share that you nailed it, but what I want to jump into is this change management topic. And I think, we've talked about epochs, right? If we go through our last three core epochs, we have the movement from on-prem to cloud, and then we have this like cyber risk era, and we have some like sub ones downstream, the break fix, the manage. We have, success evolving, a lot of like what you and the ScalePad team are dragging into the ecosystem and making happen. And I think, it should be a heyday for ScalePad right now. This is org change management 101. You got to be part of success. So I want to get this question here. Like, why do so many MSP leaders underestimate the change side of management when an AI rollout happens?
yeah. I think you've actually kind of walked yourself into the answer. And I love that you brought up change management because there's one of the things that I is spending a lot of time thinking and talking about with MSPs is the difference between change management and change leadership specifically. And those two things are not the same thing. We're in this era now where it's not enough to just quote unquote project manage the change, which is where I would put the majority of what MSPs would accept as change management
Yeah.
for any kind of initiative. It's like, yeah, we've got this project, we're going from system A to system B, so and so needs to do these tasks and whatnot. I think change leadership will focus a lot more on the actual habitual changes, addressing the resistance and the skepticism that people have, and actually going further into the org at all levels to address the fear and some of the change concerns that they have around these things. And so there's probably multiple levels at which this needs to happen. And I think we have a situation in which maybe the MSP is not prepared for this kind of role inside of their own business because, well, that's not their job currently as it stands, but it takes a lot more human nuance, let's just say, to address people on these types of things specifically, or to be able to spend the time inside of the customer's business to note the behaviors, note the habitual things that are happening, and where you might find resistance as part of like creating a little change leadership plan
Mm-hmm.
for any one initiative. And so I think, well, that's just down in the customer level. There's also the leadership level of the customer. Some leaders may come to you because as an MSP, because they say, well, my team's telling me we have to do this AI thing. And they may still be very skeptical about it. So there's the leadership skepticism. And then even your own team, you might be the driving force behind a big AI push as a company to go do more AI things, but you may have not addressed any skepticism inside your own team about whether this is going to work or not work because you haven't, had those question periods or the opportunity for people to give their input. So I think those three layers are super important to keep tabs on, because that skepticism, that fear, those habits change or have to change in all three places. And unless we're addressing that, I think it's not enough to just do the change management to say, yeah, we finished the project. I call this a zombie project, a project that's technically finished but dead on the inside.
Yeah.
And so this is a real challenge, is you're going to go around delivering all these projects that get no adoption, that get no real change downstream in the customer ranks. And they will not consider that to have been successful, even though you completed it, got paid. And this is going to create, dissension and challenges for the customer to have confidence with future projects. So we might be creating our own bed of problems overall, is what I'm saying.
I had that realization about a couple of weeks ago as I started getting into some of these conversations. At least I have that fear too. We are talking as a general industry into moving into building custom agents or building automations or building change. But we as an industry aren't stopping to ask, are we putting that monthly recurring revenue at risk? And that kind of scares me, because if that flow or that automation that we vibe coded all of a sudden loses the end client, our client, a client, or it hallucinates and disrupts an internal operation, did we just put that monthly recurring revenue that we hard earned and has been there for multiple years at risk over a little bit of revenue? That's been bouncing around in my head rent free for the last handful of weeks, and it kind of scares me a little bit.
It's funny that when you think about how to prompt AI, one of the things that is like the new buzzword this year is guardrails.
Mm-hmm.
And guardrails, if you think about what guardrails are, guardrails is what not to do, what not to think about. And I think this is one of the areas that MSPs don't often think about when they're thinking about scale and automation and some of these things, is like, what should we not be automating potentially?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is an area where it gets complicated around things like relationships, because like you feel like you don't have the capacity to deliver QBRs to all your customers. So you feel like the answer is to scale. And then naturally with the conversation around scale comes a conversation around automation. And so now we're in this trap of like, oh, we got to automate our emails, we got to automate our things, we're automate our everything about the communication with the customer. And suddenly, the relationship starts to kind of fall between the cracks because there's nobody actually talking to the customer. So I've seen this pattern happen over and over and over again. And so, but people will ask me, well, how do I scale relationships? I say, well, who told you it would be okay to scale a relationship? Like, why is that the mindset that this is what I mean about guardrails? And so I think it's kind of interesting to stop and take a moment of thought. It's like, we could probably automate and scale a big chunk of the components of the typical life cycle of a customer relationship, meeting cycle, et cetera, et cetera. But if you stop talking to customers, where does the trust go? Where does the relationship and all those other important markers of that expansion, of that retention, of that longevity, where are those things going to go? And it's worth thinking about in terms of guardrails, what not to automate.
Yeah, I first off, Marcel, great to see you. Glad to see you hopping on. Hope things are going well. I have 4 letters written down here. Matt's departed, unfortunately, already, because he loved it. We talked about human in the loop a lot on the cybersecurity of agentic last time I talked with him. And there's very real human in the loop in relationships interactions too. Like, we have human in the loop and everybody wants to look at it from like a cybersecurity side. But we got to have a human in the loop in the relationship side. I've had this thing. I haven't brought it up in a show or two in a while, and I call it, we got taught in business school Put it on an XY chart, effort and impact. Put it on an XY chart and plot the project and determine which one you're going to do. And I've been throwing a term out there, put a Z axis out there on friction and see how much friction this thing's going to create, because it may be the lowest effort, highest value, but it also might be the highest friction. And I've been really helping people think about the cases they work through by trying to plot friction in there. And if you're thinking about what you're doing in your business, automating your customer interaction is like the top of the friction points. What do we have left if we're not actually talking to our customers?
Totally.
I love your take on that. I want to jump into the next topic here in a minute.
Well, like what a great insight, the friction points. What are the friction points? I don't think we think about this enough. I don't think I've thought this component, specifically the friction points, enough. I think what I see a lot of is conflation of depth and frequency of conversations. And I'll give you an example. I'm constantly speaking to the topic of customer success. This is really the encompassing motion that MSPs build to go talk to customers, maintain the relationships, do their projects, their QBRs, EBRs, whatever you call them, and so on. In those conversations, one of the little threads that I started to pull on is this interesting pattern that I see, that MSPs tend to segment customer bases by MRR. And that immediately high-paying customers get a lot of attention, and low-paying customers get zero to no attention. And I started asking the question: it's like, how much, if you stop talking to a customer, or if you have a once yearly meeting with them because they don't pay enough, are you building trust? Simple question. And I think everybody agrees that no, you're kind of not building trust with a once yearly meeting.
Yeah.
And then the question that follows is usually, well, is the trust staying the same at least? And most people agree that no, it's actually eroding over time if all you're doing is having a once yearly meeting. And if that meeting is just to come in and pitch them on the things they need to buy and spend on, and it becomes a selling exercise. And so I think this conflation of frequency with depth, it becomes a real interesting friction point, where if we're not talking to people, we just don't know what's happening in their world. They don't hear from us. They have no confidence sort of building or maintaining over time, no trust being created over time. And so I see that's one of the biggest friction points in relationships and keeping customers, is actually whether you're proactively watering the tree, so to speak.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Rich Freeman last week, and what he was saying is that he had done an interview with I think it was Peter Melby actually, and so I think it is, but I'll go pull reference notes before I write this up, where he had made the point to say we're starting to get questions from our customers on the value we're delivering because they're noticing our tickets are being created or resolved with AI, and they're asking, why isn't the price going down? It's not Peter, actually. I want to clarify that before I move forward, but it was another CEO, another fairly large MSP. Peter talked about experiment for fun and not outcome, so you drive the cultural change. But if we're automating if we're creating new margins outside of our service desk delivery, I mean, what a holy grail moment to build these relationships. If all of a sudden we are finding 6 hours back per week, can we take our people internally and start building some muscle around sitting down and having conversations with customers? I mean, I also had this kind of other aha thought, Luis. It's like, as an AI native company, I'm going to be insanely lean. I'm not going to be your highest MRR downstream, but I could also potentially be your biggest customer, because as an insanely lean company, there's a lot more to spend on automation, and there's a lot more to spend on these use cases. So there's some paradigms there. And the last thing, and jump into the topic, and happy if you want to riff on this one before I jump away, is like, I want to look at the inverse of friction, because we talked heavily on like high friction. I want to talk about low friction. When I look at agentic use cases or AI use cases, I look at low friction as the biggest indicator. Like, what are the things that have extraordinarily low friction, if not any friction, as opportunities to begin automation? Not effort impact, but low friction. Start chunking those away, and context switching goes away for employees. Start chunking those away, and your morning prep goes away, and all of a sudden you remove all those friction points, and the employees get to do what they're really good at. So that's kind of how I've always looked at that XY chart on friction.
Yeah, I think this comes back to simple like habit and pattern breaking,
Mhm.
and it's not easy to do. Just speaking from a human perspective, people have a hard time breaking their patterns and their habits, and I think we have to be in tune with that. The folks that are blazing the trails all the time, I love it, and I'm as curious and experimental as the next person. But sometimes I'm just happy in my little happy place, doing the thing that I do the way that I do it. Uh, and don't discount age as part of the comfort zone of that, right? Too, because I think the older folks get, I think the less willing or the less risky they are to try and do these new things. And so I think this all factors into how we approach those friction points, thinking about the customer downstream and, well, are they a high level of risk tolerance, low level of risk tolerance? What's their appetite? What's their maturity for these things? Talking throughout the different levels of teams and not just make an assumption that the leader thinks this, therefore everybody else at that company thinks this, because then you hit some real, struggle issues downstream of like actually trying to get the project, or you have the naysayers kind of making the project difficult and so on. I
Yeah.
just want to briefly go back to, we were talking about those friction points. And I think one of the other friction points, specifically around this concept of strategy, becoming a strategic insider with customers. This is, I think, the thing, like Peter Melby, you mentioned, he's one of the guys has been talking about, like, we're going to be evaluated for the impact that we have, the outcomes that we're helping deliver. And a lot of MSPs are starting to realize that this commoditized IT experience is not what the majority of customers are looking for. Because more and more stuff works out of the box today than ever before. And I think that trend will continue, which means the value exchange has to shift. And in this value exchange of having to look at what outcomes we're helping deliver, what goals we're helping bring that business, with the technology and the things we're doing, is having to deliver more strategy. And I talk about this all the time. I penned this little quote, if you will. If you don't price for strategy, you won't deliver it. And so here's the challenge. The challenge is we're in a billing model that was invented 20 years, 25 years ago now. And the billing model is largely constructed as this idea of supporting per device type of, charges per month, or per user per month type of thing. And strategy 25 years ago was there, but not as omnipresent as it needs to be today. And so there's immediately a capacity challenge when you say, yeah, we got to go deliver strategy, but you don't revisit the billing model, is because suddenly you have all this time and expertise and depth and people that you need to put on this strategic type of work, only to realize we just are immediately hitting the glass ceiling of capacity with a handful of customers, and we can't do this for everybody. And so now you stop talking to all the customers that aren't paying enough. So see, we're creating our own problem, is I think the part of the friction challenge that I'm seeing. And so, as part of any revisiting of strategy and strategic conversations with customers, I think it's also important to revisit a bit of the billing and the pricing model, and whether you're actually supporting the pricing and the strategy and the capacity with the way that you're charging customers for the work. And that might be, a difficult come to Jesus moment to have with those customers as well. So, friction points.
Yeah, real friction points. I think, another friction point, and then I love this. We can talk. I think we can do friction for a whole hour, Luis, because this is the heart of where I'm studying right now. You mentioned maybe I can't support all my customers. Maybe I can't get into, 10% of them and drive that deep change. My challenge as of late has been like, look at the things we can do at 100% of them and try to start there instead of trying to look at the ones that we can only do 10%. Move 100% of the customers 10% forward versus 10% of customers 100% forward. And I think that's where success and embedding that is critical, because you have to be able to be there to enable. So I'll get off my stump. I'll jump into the next piece, which is, what leadership behaviors what leadership behaviors do you think build trust when introducing AI to a skeptical team? And in my lens, I'm going to look at this and re-ask the question for this, like, as a VCIO or a account management function, especially just coming from your world, how do they help build trust around the AI skepticism in those conversations? What are you seeing?
This is maybe counterintuitive because the entire conversation around AI that I pick up in the little corners of our channel universe here and there is how to monetize AI. Specifically, monetization seems to be the big thing. When all you care about is monetization, you're going to have very, very different approach to doing certain things than somebody else might. It's the perfect classic example of, do you give your account managers or VCIOs quotas? And if you do, guess what they're going to try and do? They're going to try and sell, sell, sell because they have quotas, because they make commission based on the sales that they make. And so the client centricity is so important here in building trust. It's always obvious to the customer when the MSP has a self-oriented view of things in the conversations that they're having. And I talk about the trust advisor formula all the time, where trustworthiness is this idea of credibility, reliability, and intimacy divided by self-orientation. And so the more the MSP is about what they do and how they are going to make money and what their standards are, these things will actually diminish the amount of trustworthiness you're able to build in a relationship. And so counterintuitively, I think the second that an MSP can walk away from a project where they don't feel it's the right fit for the customer, ironically, those are the things that create the most trust with that customer, and the customer feeling like, oh, they're actually looking out for us and our best interests. But when every interaction is, oh, we need you to buy this, and oh, yeah, totally, that's going to be a great solution for you guys.
Yeah.
And the person selling it has no impact on the actual deployment or the change leadership of it, these things start to become super, super transparent and very difficult for maintaining and building trust, for sure.
You got me on a spicy topic I care about here, but I want to bring in Martial's point because you said it, right? Like some SPs want to be strategy, some want to deliver and create reliability. And I think what you said is identify who you are before you just let the wave push you in a different direction. Maybe a more metaphorical term there than what you said, but just because the industry is telling you AI is the big next thing, don't go in and force something just because you feel like you have to have an answer. And in my opinion, you said deployment and change management have to come along with it. And then this is where my all excited statement comes from. Like AI, you read the McKinsey studies, you read the Forrester data, you read the Gartner data, you read every analytic on all this thing, because as a data person, that's at least what I do. And almost all of the things that create a compounding factor aren't technical. It's by the 3-to-1 study, or a study shows 3-to-1 leadership, 3-to-1 success in an AI rollout when executive leaders communicate their intent of the actual rollout. One little thing you can do right there, just like very simple. You talked about participation earlier, having the employees participate. That is another key element of a successful rollout. But that's a lot. That's embedding a human almost into the company. So how do you balance that friction of I don't work for you, but I want to help you have that strategy on AI? I think that's what we're all trying to figure out. I'd just be curious to get your take, especially from the success side.
Yeah, I call this being a strategic insider, and I think the unique opportunity for MSPs, and I love Marcial's comments, because I think one of the challenges of this is that the customer sometimes is also on those two things. Like some customers like just stability and reliability. And we're often just trying to template wash our approach to all customers because AI, opportunity, and monetization. And so we go and we try to really push on customers that maybe are not so interested in the change to try and innovate, when the reality is they'd be perfectly happy. And what they see as a good value exchange is simply that things are working, and that they're stable. And so I think we have to spend that time understanding the customer better, so that we are having the right conversation with the right customers, and not just trying to go through and deploy this across the board. But coming back to the other topic, I think that the challenge with a lot of what we're saying is that we're not spending the time to understand the customer, and we're not customer centric, really, if we think about it. We're not putting people in a position to succeed around actually building relationship, becoming, and the term was strategic insider. If you're going to get invited to a boardroom table where the customer is just making decisions about their future, what do you think are the markers of a person who needs to be in that room? They know the business intimately inside and out. They use language that is we, us, our, because they have that focus internally as an insider. They share the narrative and the language and the insider stuff about that industry, that vertical, and that customer specifically. And so when you couple those things together, you start to realize that if you're not speaking the same language, if you don't know the business inside out, you're probably not welcome to the table to have an input or a say in the decisions that are going to model their future. And so this is really the thing at the heart of the problem, is that we're not strategic insiders. We are just vendors for the most part, because we show up when we need to sell something. And so there was somebody on a Substack or Reddit talking about how they define a vendor. A vendor is somebody you manage and somebody you negotiate with. So imagine the
Yeah.
fun relationship that we have with most customers if they see us as a vendor, is that they're just managing us, quote unquote, and they're trying to negotiate with us, quote unquote. So no wonder there's friction, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I've used a far more derogatory term on this show before, plumber. A lot of the times.
Hey, don't knock on the plumbers, man. The
Oh
plumbers.
no, I'm not knocking on a plumber. I'm saying that's the way that some MSPs get perceived by their team. You call them when something breaks. You don't call them to come proactively think about designing your house. And so that's why I use that term. I'm not knocking on plumbers. The whole world moves around on people that take care of that. I just think when I use that term, it's like you have to shift that perspective to be able to be in the room to have that conversation. And if you're calling, so if the only time you interact is when you get called because something's broke, then you got to fix that first before you can ever consider driving AI change management downstream in one of the fastest moving problems than I think I've ever seen in my years in this space right now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, think about this too, and you're a little bit younger than me, John, and so you may have not been hearing this same thing being said for as long as I have, but the industry has been saying you got to deliver as much of your labor or services with the cheapest labor possible. And so there was, for a long time, this maybe standard that you would push, the least expensive, cheapest hires to your L1 to solve all the majority of issues that pop up in level 1. And then keep the expensive and smart people for the real difficult things. And I think we're seeing an interesting inflection point on that, because we need a lot more nuance. I constantly talk about this concept of maximizer versus focuser MSPs. I think we're getting to this moment in time where maximizing utilization is not interesting anymore, because it's removing the ability for MSPs to really solve issues and challenges and get deep on the needs of customers and all this stuff. And so, man, it's just it keeps going and going and going and going. So a lot of interesting things to talk about there in terms of how we're revisiting a bit of our go-to-market as MSPs in general.
Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing verticalization for a long time. This thing should surely push a little bit of that verticalization. I've been talking, I will say, like anecdotally, I've had conversations with a handful of MSPs, deep vertical MSPs, in the dentist field, in the legal field, or in the like architect side. And they focus on maybe 2 or 3 lines of business. They're actually winning a lot of AI contracts because they know that business. They know how they operate. They know how they actually facilitate. Whereas the broad strokes, I serve everybody approach isn't really landing them too much revenue downstream in AI, because you need that special knowledge.
Yeah. So I want us not to confuse verticalization with specialization. And I'll simply, because I know an MSP that was supporting customers with commercial laundry and figured out the software they were all seeming to use. 70% of them were using the same software. They went and bought this software and they verticalized truly to become, judge, jury, and executioner of the whole thing. And they're absolutely killing it. So I thought that was an interesting view on an actual verticalization. So, yeah.
Well, and that jumps into a big, hairy topic we surely don't have time to talk about, but the convergence of services and software, like how converging it's coming. I mean, that in itself warrants an entire hour. I want to pick in, we talked about the unspoken barrier of AI for MSPs. Some of the best tactics out there are things that are unattainable. I just frankly, right? Like you read the data.
Like what?
Like have an executive sponsor, establish an AI committee, engage with the entire employee base before going forward. Like in a current relationship for a lot of MSPs, that's unattainable. So I'm not saying it's not attainable for the right MSP. So how do you earn the room to be able to start doing some of these tactics that are clearly, clearly, I'll just say defensively data backed, the best tactics to drive AI adoption when you don't have access to the employees, you don't have access to the executives, you don't have access to the champions?
You have to create it. Like if you don't have access, this is the thing you have to work on as an MSP, and it's going to be critically important to the success of any of these things downstream. It's not enough to have the customer tell you, "Oh, we need AI," and then to whip up a little SOW on an AI project, go deploy it, and walk away. By the way, this has been the MO that MSPs have actually liked so much because the industry has rewarded a P&L that shows healthy project sales and project deployments. And this has always been built on this idea that we go in, we do our little projects, and we quote unquote fuck off to do
Yeah.
other things. But AI is different because of this whole thing around habits, around the skepticism about the change. We have to get deeper with customers on this stuff. And when I had Dan Mitchell on the podcast from MIP Global, the perfect example that we got into this conversation about was, we're not an IT company anymore. Like we are quite literally like a training company. We are a business process mapping and management company. Like there's all these differences to how the go to market actually needs to happen for the work to get done. That I think this is where a lot of MSPs will fail. If they can't adapt to that difference in working, they're just going to come in trying to do an AI project only for a CPA firm that's already in the boardroom to come in, or ERP company that's already in the boardroom to come in and say, yeah, we are experts at mapping out your processes, figuring out where the people are going to need help, and then going to market there. So are MSPs needing to become training companies? No, not necessarily, but they have to understand that need and be able to address it, be able to drive, the requirements for that as part of their project. So I think this is some of the challenge, that if we don't spend that time to earn that right to a strategic discussion, you will kind of continue getting more and more relegated over time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think though I had an aha this week. I'm happy to share it live. It's kind of a deep aha, and I think it's a defensible one. I drove AI change at Avic. I didn't like the term. I got coined the AI czar. That kind of had some like negative. I was like, don't call me that. Like people know what the czar are calling them.
That is so funny, the czar.
But the point being is, you go figure it out and you go run point. And I remember, so one of the best, again, tactics out there: establish an AI champions network and establish an AI council. Two of like the most tried and true McKinsey superhuman data points out there, along with executive sponsorship. I can rattle all that off. But this is the aha I had. And I think if you're an MSP and you're listening, this is a really good unlock. I ran our AI council. Okay. And every time before I walked into the AI council, I DM'd my tech lead, our technology leader, our IT leader, and said, give me the data on what's happening so I can make decisions.
Interesting.
Noodle with it and run with it. But you don't have to do everything. You just have to have a role in the transformation. And that's kind of one of the biggest unlocks I've had as of recent. It's like, the IT people still have a home in this without being the entire journey. And so I'll leave that as a nice little cliffhanger as we transition to the tail here. We don't have to drive everything. We just have to do what we're good at. But there's opportunity, of course, to drive more.
I'll send you a link. I was writing about this not long ago. The idea was quite simply, strategy discussions are earned. That's the name of the article. And it dawned on me that a lot of folks in the MSP ecosystem, they simply presume of the right to a strategic discussion with customers.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually one of the mistakes that is made, because we have to earn that. We have to have, the ability to communicate why we should be invited into the boardroom and so on. It's not, we don't have the right to show up there. I think this is the thing that, just like we are shifting our level of engagement with customers from the MSP side, customers also have to go through their own transition of letting us into the castle, so to speak, to have the conversations at the level that we now want to have them at. So it's a two-way street. We can't presume that we have the rights at all.
Absolutely.
I'm not logged into the chat on the little StreamYard thing, so I'll send you in a private chat. Maybe you can post it if you don't mind.
Absolutely. And I'll pull Martial's point as we get to the top of the hour here. And so Martial said, and I'm going to copy this as well. It's about making sure the foundation's there for the clients to adapt AI. And, I've said this a million times on my show, and Martial and I are lockstep. Like, the foundation has to be there. And you used the term guardrails earlier. The guardrails have to be there. The governance has to be there. The policy has to be there. There are a lot of repeatable things here. And so I'll put this out into chat for everybody.
I found the LinkedIn. I just I posted it on LinkedIn. Just
perfect. So we're at the final segment here. We got 8 minutes left. It's crazy how fast 52 minutes goes, isn't it? It's been fun so far. I have one question that I always wrap up before going to my final segments here. What question didn't I ask today that you thought we might jump into as we talk through this discussion?
I did not have a preconceived notion of the questions that I should be asked. Yeah. I think this is maybe one of my own personal unlocks in life, is to not have these preconceived notions as much anymore, to just kind of come in with an open mind and the curiosity. And it's been so incredible to kind of walk through life with a bit of, or without that weight on my shoulders of, I expect this person to ask me this, or because I show up like this, or I present like this. So yeah, I didn't have any, I'm honest when I say that. Yeah.
You saw me got all light up for a reason. You want to know why? I'm giving a keynote at GeekCon about the term curiosity. And I analyzed every coffee chat before I came in to that keynote to prepare some learnings, because a lot of my curiosity has been built over last year because I stopped sitting in rooms and waiting for my turn to talk, and I started only being able to ask questions on the show. I broke a little bit of that rule every once in a while, but I think we're at 56 or 57 shows now. The term curiosity has showed up in about 30 of them or 40 of them, some fairly high statistic. And it's that centerpiece of everything we're all learning. And so I just got all lit up because you
love it.
You moved my data point up one more there, Luis, as we wrapped up the show.
Hold on. Let me help your AI agent data analytics. Curiosity.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. That'll be one of the quotes up there. It's just over and over and over.
Yeah. Well, it's tough as a host, and I have a little bit of this experience myself where I am trying to listen to understand and spend more time on that sort of, big ears type of component of the conversations. But as a host, you have to play this role of driving the conversation, asking the questions. And so I get a bit of that challenge that you have where you'd love to just listen more, but we also have to kind of jump in and do the thing. So, but I appreciate what you're doing, and you are really good at listening. And I find that I notice that now when people are actually trying to engage with what you're saying. And it takes a special level of focus and dedication to a guest on your show so that you don't wander, right? Because it's so easy to wander with everything that's going on.
Well, and I love to get deep, and I like to walk away with tactics and tips. And I think there's a lot of them here. I'll write them all up and push the briefing out here this afternoon. But I want to say thank you for jumping on the show. Normally I have a wrap up segment, but we got so deep into this topic, we were in good stuff, and I didn't want to just jump into the cheesy wrap up because it's not all that special. But I do have one. The final segment's always this. You just took 55 minutes out of your day to help MSPs, to help educate me, and so I'm very appreciative. I always like to give a little shameless plug at the very end, real quick. We got to pull Peter up here. It is important to set the expectations with client and manage that.
Yeah,
I just want to get Peter in there because I think it's a really good point to bring home.
Like I say, I always put this on literally every deck that I have. Uncommunicated expectations become premeditated resentments. I love that one. Yeah.
Oh,
Peter will love that one.
I need you to write that one down. I'll find. I'm sure the transcript will grab that one for me. But this has been wonderful. Where I was going, sorry, I got squirreled there for a second. It's the shameless plug. Tell everybody. We'll write up to 1,000 people tomorrow or later this afternoon. like why they should reach out to you, what they should reach out to you for, a little bit about ScalePad. That's your shameless plug as we wrap up the show.
No, I appreciate it. I get to be the person that's in love with the problem and not with the solution. So I rarely go in with a hard pitch on the things that we're building. They kind of naturally come out through the conversation as people realize that there is maybe a better way and a more interesting way to tackle and solve some of the challenges. But the intersection where I love living is truly, hey, I'm having this problem. Would you mind jumping on a call so we can just kind of chat through that stuff? I love to experiment on some of those ideas. If folks out there are thinking about their customer success motion, about their account management challenges, I've heard it all. And so this is the kind of the place where I love to just have conversations, ideate a little bit on what are some of the ways that you could approach solving that, providing frameworks and ideas. I have a lot of materials I've built over the years on different things, from becoming a strategic insider to running a quick scope on change leadership that you may need to do for a specific initiative or big project with a customer, to things like segment playbook templates for how to think about your engagements with customers across different segments. I got all sorts of materials like that, and I often share them at my presentations at the events and stuff. And I don't like to just drop them on people without the context of the entire presentation, but I welcome folks to be like, hey, I was curious to hear more about the segmentation stuff. Let's jump into it. Happy to share the stuff once I've given you a bit of the mindset on it, because that'll help you understand the stuff better. So yeah, bring me in. Happy to have a conversation, whether you're a ScalePad partner or not, on customer success and the ability to execute on this critical piece of expansion and retention.
I'll say, as a good friend of mine, I can't emphasize that as the most accurate statement you've ever said. You are just genuinely willing to give and sit down and talk to anybody.
And thanks, man.
I'm always appreciative for it. And to that point, I walked away with learning a lot today, man. So thank you. It's been a wonderful show. Appreciate all the time you committed to today. So where will I see you next? Where are you next on the road?
Yeah, I'll be in a couple weeks. At a partners kickoff event back in Fort Lauderdale. Then I'll be in Chicago for ConnectWise Evolve meetings. Yeah. And that'll bring me back home for about a week. And then May is a little crazy. I'm spending 3 weeks in Europe at some ConnectWise events, and then a couple of Huntress roadshows. So yeah, it'll be a long little stretch.
Well, I hope people run out there, they bounce in the hall and say hello. It sounds like you made a bit of an impact for a lot of people here today, at least jumping in, that are welcome to share their stream. We'll share this out to everybody. Have a wonderful Friday and have a great weekend. Thanks again.
Good to see everybody.